God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for all of those who have joined the call. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you for all attendees. Lord, bless their homes, bless their families, bless all those who are connected to them. Lord, help us to have a very fruitful conversation. We ask that at the conclusion of this conversation, everyone leaves more informed. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As President and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, I want to welcome each of you to this presentation. Beyond Roe v. Wade, a call to action. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the SCLC has taken a position that this issue is of very concern to us. First and foremost, we see this as an attack on the individual, and we stand against the slippery slope of stripping the rights of individuals. This is undemocratic. Furthermore, we are fundamentally opposed to conversations surrounding the unborn. When there are forces in this country that want to destroy and abort the social support needed for children after they're born, and you telling me that you care about the unborn and you don't care about the individual or the right of children and others in terms of the parenthood who have survived this system in terms of racism and poverty, which Dr. King talked about the three ills in society: racism, poverty, and militaristic. Ladies and gentlemen, I have often warned about this system is going backwards. I have said it for many of years. And now the reality, what is taking place, is something that frustrates not only me, but those and others throughout the global village, the global concern, the international community. We are focused on building communities of love and support for all of our children and for all of the human race. Regardless of their color, it's only one race. That's the human race. And how wealthy their parents may be. That's not a concern. We are concerned about the holistic approach of society. Ladies and gentlemen, I have often warned that this particular action would take place, and here it is. I've said it many and many times. I look forward to this conversation and want to thank all of you, our moderator, Miss Josephine Morton, who I am proud to say is one of our most active chapters in her leadership as president in Prince George's County in Maryland. We want to accept the working relationship of the National Liaison of Women Health Initiatives. And I also want to acknowledge the panelists, Ms. Sheena Matthews of Planned Parenthood, the CEO of Sister Reach, Ms. Cherie Scott, Mrs. Patty Russo of the Campaign School at Yale, and Virginia State Senator Jennifer McClellan. Senator, thank you. To the rest of the panelists, thank you. We want to acknowledge you for all the work that you've done, and I would like to thank you a million times. And I don't want to overlook to any degree my chief of staff, who's worked so diligently and always committed in doing what is right, and particularly with this project. None other than Mr. DeMark Liggins, my chief of staff here at the National SCLC. Thank you again, and we trust you will be moved by tonight's presentation. Godspeed.
Well, wasn't that was definitely an opening for us. We want to thank our president of our national chapter, Dr. Charles Steele. Thank you also, Dr. Steele, for the great job that you do with us in actually cultivating us into nonviolence in the way that Dr. King's mission said we are supposed to be. Good evening to our panel and to our audience. My name is Josephine Morning. I am the president of the Prince George's County, Maryland chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, also known as SCLC. I want to thank our panel and our audience for spending their time with us this evening, discussing a very important life-changing event that has taken place in our country in the last few months. We know that you could be spending your time elsewhere, but you chose to spend it with us, and for that, we are very thankful. If you have questions, this is to the audience. If you have questions, please type them in the chat line, and we will discuss them at the end. I want to also take this opportunity to thank Reverend R.U.R. Ray for leading us in this effort to present this phenomenal forum. I will not delay any longer. I would like to introduce our panelists. And as I introduce our panelists will talk with you about their organization. I will first introduce you to Reverend R.U.R. Ray, President and CEO of Women of Praise. Reverend Ray?
Thank you so much, Ms. Morning. I am so happy to be here and to engage in a conversation about reproductive rights. I am the president and CEO of Women of Praise. Women of Praise is an organization, a nonprofit organization that provides spiritual support to women of color working in politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Senator Jennifer McClellan.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I am Senator Jennifer McClellan. I represent the Metro Richmond area in Virginia. Have been a champion of reproductive health my entire career, including service in the House of Delegates. But in 2020, carried the Reproductive Health Protection Act, which made Virginia the first state in the South to proactively expand access to abortion care and proactively expand reproductive rights. So very glad to be with you this evening.
Thank you so much, Senator McClellan. Our next person that we will be introducing is Ms. Sheena Matthews, who is the Director of Movement Partnerships, Planned Parenthood Federation of America.
Mark, you're in mute. Okay.
I would say Sheena's not making the live call, so we'll say hey to Sheena. Because she's gonna
hi to Sheena. Our next panelist is Ms. Patricia Russo, who's the Executive Director of the Campaign School at Yale. Ms. Russo.
Thank you so much, Josephine, and good evening, everyone. And thank you. Special thanks and love to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference for inviting me, including us. And of course, I cannot not celebrate my rock star, fabulous grad, Ajua Ray. Reverend Ray is one of our rock star grads, and we're so proud of the way in which our grads lead in the world, talk about communities of love. That so describes Reverend Ray so brilliantly. So it's just such an honor to be standing here with you in solidarity. Our school is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. Our 5-day intensive, which we hold every June, is at Yale Law School. Our mission is to increase the number of women in the political pipeline. So in addition to inspiring you to get out there and to lead in any way that you choose, we're really hoping, my subliminal goal is always to get you to think about running for office.
Thank you so much. The next panelist will be Ms. Cherise Scott, founder and CEO of Sister Reach.
Greetings. Thank you so much for having us. And yes, Sister Reach is a reproductive justice organization based in Memphis, Tennessee, and now also in Chicago, Illinois. We are a 501c3 nonprofit supporting the reproductive autonomy of women and teens of color, poor and rural women, LGBTQIA folks, gender nonconforming people and their families through the framework of reproductive justice. Our mission is to empower our base to lead healthy lives, raise healthy families, and live in healthy and sustainable communities. And we do that work from a four-pronged strategy of education, policy and advocacy, culture shift, and harm reduction. I'm glad to be here tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Our next panelist will be Mr. DeMark Liggins, Chief of Staff of SCLC.
Hey, I'm DeMark Liggins. I am with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Obviously, SCLC, we've been around since 1957, and our mission is pretty simple. We want to try to continue to try to save the soul of America and help redeem the soul of America. And we do that through, obviously nonviolent advocacy, and direct action, and with the intense work of our chapters. And I would be remiss, I want to give a little bit of my time because Josephine, I don't want you to forget to introduce yourself and the great work you do, Prince George's, because we couldn't be us as a national office without people like Josephine. And of course, since I'm talking just quickly, obviously on Dr. Steele's behalf, but also on our board of trustees, we want to make sure we thank everybody. So, but I'm going to yield the rest of that to you, Josephine.
Thank you, Mr. Liggins. Okay. We will have a video from Ms. Sheena Matthews.
I am Sheena Matthews, the Director of Movement and Partnership Engagement with Planned Parenthood Action Fund. I would like to thank Dr. Steele in his leadership with SCLC in supporting Planned Parenthood to make sure all women have the right to choose what they want to do with their bodies. On Tuesday, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina and Representative Chris Smith from New Jersey introduced a federal abortion ban. The bill, which Graham announced at a press conference alongside anti-abortion activists, would ban abortion at 15 weeks nationwide, doubling down with an even more extreme version of the ban than previously introduced. While the bill is not expected to receive a vote in either chamber in the current Congress, it is a clear demonstration of what's at stake for abortion rights. We all know access to safe abortion services has proven over time to discourage women from exploring unsafe methods to end their pregnancy, especially women in underserved communities or who have experienced the trauma of abuse, rape, and incest. Make no mistake about what this bill is. It is a federal abortion ban. The chaos, confusion, and devastation we are now seeing across the country is exactly the environment anti-abortion lawmakers have worked for decades to create, and they now want to bring to every state in the nation. This has never been about states' rights. This is about control, and they won't stop until abortion is banned across the country. With these bans, these lawmakers are telling us what they plan to do should they gain power in Congress. And we should definitely take their word at that. Lawmakers want to control our bodies, our votes, lives, and futures as means to hold on to their power. The American people overwhelmingly support access to safe, legal abortion and are very furious about lawmakers imposing abortion bans and interfering with their personal health care decisions. We will fight against this effort to ban abortion nationwide, just as we are fighting against bans in states across the country. If you look at a map, the same lawmakers who are attacking abortion rights are also attacking voting rights. And so this is why your vote really matters. Representation really matters. And we're asking you to definitely participate and use your voice and your power in this midterm election. We would also like you to share your story, retweet, get the word out on social media. And I definitely want to say thank you so much for SCLC and Dr. Steele for supporting this fight with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Okay, at this point now, I'm going to jump right into our questions, okay? The first, and I'm going to say thank you, Ms. Matthews. I'm sorry, I may have said Ms. Scott. I meant thank you, Ms. Matthews. The first three questions I will have will be to Ms. Scott.
Okay.
Ms. Scott, could you tell us what is Roe versus Wade?
Sure. So the United States Supreme Court delivered a decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, eliminating access to safe legal abortions for millions of people in the United States just over the summer, just few weeks ago. The 6-3 ruling overturned the 50 years of precedent set by Roe v. Wade and strengthened in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Approximately half of the states in the United States have near total abortion bans or prohibitions that limit access to abortions. In the majority opinion, Justice Alito wrote that Constitution does not include the right to abortion care. This flagrant decision not only thwarts constitutional due process guaranteed by the 14th Amendment and the right to privacy, but will also affirm advocates' fears of further attempts to undermine the legal basis for enumerated rights regarding the sexuality, sexual behavior, and reproductive rights of every American that we just heard Sheena Matthews talk about in her video to us this evening. So Roe v. Wade protected that constitutional privacy right to abortion access. And now with it being overturned, states have basically carte blanche to make decisions about whether or not abortion will be legal in their states. And of course, I'm living in Tennessee, and other states across the country, especially southern states, have already moved into their total abortion ban phase.
Wow, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My next question is, and I think it sort of falls in with what you just answered, but it says, how does the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade affect women's reproductive health?
Sure. So the overturn of Roe v. Wade really leaves people unable to access the full range of reproductive and sexual health care options, which basically denies us our rights to make our own decisions about our lives and futures. The U.S. already is facing a worsening reproductive health care crisis, and a post-Roe future makes it even more dangerous. So for example, Black women, in particular Black mamas, and those who can become pregnant are already have some of the highest rates of maternal mortality, and also have births that in infant mortality in our state, especially in the South. So we're already seeing these kind of high risk issues that are happening, and will be exacerbated because folks who maybe would have a fetal anomaly would not be able to choose an abortion in many states. Some states have passed laws that do not factor in life or danger of the mother, or cases of rape and incest. And so we're also talking about being forced to bring pregnancies to term that are the product of a molestation or a rape, which is definitely disproportionately impacted in our communities. Actually, before I did this panel, I just did another interview with one of our local news stations about the fact that here in Memphis, that we are still behind in processing rape kits that go back as far as the 1970s, and that our governor has chosen basically not to even offer the money for the capacity to have enough folks to process those rape kits. Instead, has only given half of the resources that state officials have requested in order for rape kits to be processed. So I think that that's just something that we need to be thinking about when we are considering the ways in which people are accessing or thinking about accessing abortion care. The fact that these types of laws dehumanize people, and as a Black woman, and as those of us who are on this panel as Black people, with the historical violence against Black and brown people's bodies, but Black women's bodies in particular, since we were enslaved in this country, this only continues to turn the clock back to a moment of enslavement. This is what this is for Black women. And so once again, being at the hands of white men and white politics, white power, controlling our bodies and not allowing us to have any level of bodily autonomy or self-determination, further dehumanizing us and our future.
Thank you. The next question sort of impounds on what you just said. The next question is, how does the ruling impact women of color in particular?
Well, for Black women, Roe v. Wade has always been the floor, not the ceiling. When the Hyde Amendment passed, it definitely didn't necessarily, it really left women of color hanging, to be quite honest, because we would not have been able and have not been able, for those of us who are low income, to get abortion access through Medicaid or through any kind of public aid in many of the conservative states. So our fight has always been for the resources and freedom to choose when and if we have children as Black people and as Black women, and to be able to raise our families with dignity. Due to racism and other forms of discrimination in the United States, the impact of this decision will cause disproportionate harm for people of color. Pregnant people, women living on lower incomes, young people, immigrants, and of course, members of our LGBT community. I definitely want to highlight trans men in this moment who can also give birth. Black people overwhelmingly support abortion access and believe that it should remain legal. And that women should be able to get safe abortion. So we also don't want to turn the clock back to a time right before I was born, when Black women in particular were using several different harmful means to end a pregnancy. We don't want to see that happen to our young people. Not a country that is as well resourced as the United States of America. We definitely don't want to force people's backs against the wall, but we won't stop fighting for our human and civil rights, and we will not stop fighting until reproductive justice is the law of the land. And I know that I'm using a term that may not be necessarily familiar to those, but reproductive justice very specifically is different than reproductive health or rights, is a term that was coined in Chicago in 1994 by 12 Black women. And it was created to center the lived experiences of Black women around issues of reproductive and sexual health. Right, so that framework is grounded in Black feminist theory and human rights. And central to reproductive justice theory is the universal human right to dignity, self-determination, and bodily autonomy. So it's designed to center people whose liberty has been violated and whose social and economic well-being and culture has been deliberately ignored. It seeks to liberate us. And so unfortunately, this law does quite the opposite. But we're not going to stop fighting.
We never will.
No,
thank you so much, Ms. Scott. I really appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay, those are the only questions I have for you. Next, I will be asking Senator McClellan a few questions, if you don't mind. What is the state of reproductive rights in Virginia?
Thank you for that question. So before Roe versus Wade, abortion was legal in Virginia, and after Roe versus Wade, abortion is legal in Virginia. Although because of the work that we did in 2020 and 2021, we removed the biggest barriers to access to abortion, which were legal under Roe and the cases that Sharice talked about. And so we removed, we prescribed it. We used to prescribe in the code the informed consent that had to be given, including a mandatory ultrasound. So we got rid of that. We got rid of what are called targeted TRAP laws, targeted regulations against abortion providers, which regulated abortion clinics the same as a hospital, even though in most cases, abortion is not surgery. It can be performed with medication. We expanded who could provide an abortion, allowing nurse practitioners within their scope of practice to provide service. And then we also removed restrictions on health plans sold in the health exchange under the Affordable Care Act from covering abortion. So right now in Virginia, abortion is legal in the first trimester, can be performed by any nurse practitioner or physician. In the second trimester, it can be provided by a physician in a hospital. First trimester does not have to be in the hospital. As a matter of fact, it could be at home with telehealth and medication. And then in the third trimester, it's limited to cases where the pregnancy could result in death or physical or substantial mental impairment of the mother. In all cases, abortions can be performed to save the life of the mother. So that's the current state. But I will say, we have become a safe haven for abortion in the South, particularly as Texas and other states that had trigger laws, which took effect as soon as Roe was overturned. We started seeing patients coming from as far as Texas pretty quickly. So we are concerned that that could have an impact on access just because our system could become overwhelmed. But I want to reiterate, and I think we're going to talk about this in a minute, we are that safe haven because of laws that were passed in 2020 that can easily be repealed in 2023 or in the future.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, well, this is a two-part question. What legislative efforts are underway to protect a woman's right to abortion? And number two, what efforts have you led or been a part of on this issue?
So in Virginia, I mentioned the Reproductive Health Protection Act, which I carried with Delegate Charnel Herring, and also the bill that allowed the plans sold on the exchange to cover abortion services, which I carried with Delegate Sally Hudson. We have been on defense ever since. We saw with a change in the majority in the House with a Republican governor, attorney general, and lieutenant governor coming in, and a one-seat majority, Democratic majority in the Senate this past session, and I suspect the 23 session, we've been on defense, protecting those gains. But we are looking at the possibility of a constitutional amendment for reproductive freedom. Probably be difficult to get it passed with the current makeup, but we will begin that process. And we are looking at do we need to proactively expand the access we have, or do we stay on defense? I do want to recognize that there is a bill pending in Congress that was introduced by Senator Tim Kaine, my senator here in Virginia, that would basically codify the state of abortion laws before the Dobbs decision. So it would codify in federal law the status quo then that would prohibit states from enacting restrictions that were inconsistent with Roe and its progeny cases. So hopefully that will pass this session. But if not, this battle is playing out in every state. And in Virginia, we are fighting to make sure we protect our progress.
Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate that fight, I must say. The last question is, how will the vote affect reproductive rights in Virginia?
How important is the vote?
Yes. How will the vote affect reproductive rights in Virginia?
Well, this is now a political decision. With the Dobbs case, we no longer have a right to access to abortion. And frankly, we no longer have a right to privacy. And that's a whole nother conversation we need to have. But that means this is now a political decision that is playing out both at the federal level with the ban that Senator Graham introduced and the proactive protection that Senator Kaine introduced. But it's playing out in all 50 states. And elections will determine majorities. In Virginia, and I know this is a nonpartisan organization, but I'm just gonna be real. When Republicans were in charge of the General Assembly, we saw restrictions passed. We saw bans introduced, but most of them, they did not pass. But we did see restrictions, including the ultrasound requirement and all those requirements that are medically unnecessary that we were only able to repeal because Democrats gained the majority. I'm not saying there aren't pro-choice Republicans. They're rare, but majorities control what committee something goes to, who's on that committee, will it get out of committee? And so you really need to, at every level, the state and federal level, And frankly, at local levels, because some localities are trying through zoning ordinances to pass restrictions as well. You need to look at, if you want to protect access to reproductive health, which includes, abortion care is health care. You need to elect candidates who believe that government should not be inserting itself in the medical decisions of pregnant people, and vote accordingly.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, my next question will be for Ms. Russo. Ms. Russo, why is it important for people to vote in federal and state elections?
It's important for people to vote on all levels, federal, state, local. I'm so happy to be following Senator McClellan because she's such a stellar example of why we need more women in leadership. A perfect example. When you have old white men, I'm sorry, but you have old white men talking about reproductive health, our reproductive health as women, it's offensive. It's offensive to me. Women think differently, we lead differently, we're collaborative. The day that Roe was overturned was one of the most insane days here at the school. We received hundreds of calls, emails, text messages from women who were frantic. I can't believe this happened. How can this be? I've enjoyed Roe v. Wade for almost 50 years, and now my daughter's not going to have that same right. So she's going to have fewer rights than I did as a young person. I want to understand this. Another one said, Patty, I'm a Black woman. Women, Black and brown women are disproportionately impacted by these decisions. Young people, teenagers, and Connecticut too is a safe haven, Senator McClellan. The logistics of being a safe haven, the culture right now that has been created in our country as a result of this decision, a young woman who's scared and pregnant and has no money, has no resources, is going to be taking a trip across the border to beautiful Connecticut. I hope so. But again, we have just made it even harder for women who have so few resources available in our country, have just made it even harder. What do we do about it? So now I'm feeling like I did back in 2016 after the presidential. How can this happen? What happened? I can't believe it. I'm so depressed. What can I do? Well, once you start getting dressed and you break up with Ben and Jerry's, call me back in January and we'll talk about you coming to the 5-day intensive or a 1-day intensive. We created our 1-day training, the campaign school at Yale, the basics, as a direct result of the 2016 presidential, because back in that time, just as I experienced the day Roe was overturned in June, I'm asking women who are calling me, texting me, where are you registered to vote? Oh, I'm not registered to vote. You're not registered to vote. Do you have a pad and a pen handy? I'm going to give you the name of the place where you're getting off the phone with me and you're going to go register to vote. And so there's just kind of the basics. Until you can make an emotional connection with someone and they see how this will directly impact their lives, they're not going to vote. They're not going to vote. But so when something like this happens, what I want to do is just grab everybody who's calling us to say, come, we'll train you. We'll train you how to be an effective leader on an issue you feel passionately about in your community, because everything is local, right? Senator McClellan will tell you, Sharice will tell you, all politics is local. Everything is local. A member of Congress, a state senator, even a local council person, they start getting phone calls and you start showing up on their doorstep, literally, they're going to pay attention. They're going to pay attention. So that's what it's about. It's about changing this climate of fear and criminality, quite frankly, right now, to one where women, and it's a war on women. It's an attack on us. And I think about if we had the majority of women in federally and state and locally, would we even be having this conversation tonight? We would not be. I started my career working for the late, great Bella Abzug, who was in Congress at the time with the late, great Shirley Chisholm. I can't tell you how much key pieces of legislation those two dynamos were able to create, again, crossing the political aisles to get key pieces of legislation passed at that time that would have a positive impact on women in their communities. That's why leadership makes a difference. That's why more women running and winning makes a difference. And call us, reach out to us, we'll help get you there.
Wow, thank you, Ms. Russo. You make me want to run.
Okay, that's the goal. You're never too old, Josephine. This is your third act.
Okay. Okay, the next question is, what should people consider when choosing the right candidate?
Well, you have to do your research, right? You want to make sure that the person that you're supporting is supporting you, right? Gosh, he looks like such a nice guy. Not if he's voting your rights away. He's not, right? So you've got to do your homework. And thanks to the internet, right? Thanks, we're all together tonight, thanks to technology, it's very easy to Google who's running for office in your community and get their stand on issues that are important to you, and then use the opportunity anytime you can to just say, gosh, yeah, he looks like a nice guy, but do you know that he voted, this way? And I feel really passionately about those issues. How do you feel? And then, showing up at community meetings and asking them those questions. People like that, they want to hide. They don't want to answer questions, but there's power in numbers. I always say, grab a group of girlfriends, kindred spirits, make a party out of it, go to the community meeting, have your questions, and not just you, but a couple of your friends, and ask those questions, and then go out and have a nice dinner together and talk about what you're going to do tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day. We've got to change who's in office. If you don't like how they're representing you, they're not representing you. Look, we're talking about choice tonight. We may be talking about contraception in 6 months from now, right? I'm thinking back, Josephine, to the comment that then Senator Harris asked, I believe it was Brett Kavanaugh, when he was being considered on the U.S. Supreme Court. And the question she asked him were, do you know of any other decisions like Roe v. Wade that impacts a male's reproductive health care? And of course, we all know the answer to that. If men got pregnant, Sharice, you probably know Florence Kennedy. Florence Kennedy, if men got pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. Well, kind of. It's the patriarchy. It's just a laundry list, right? When we use our voices, when we work collaboratively, we lift everybody up. Aja was a grad of our school. She'll tell you we are a phone call away, an email away. This work is hard. Senator McClellan will tell you being on the front lines, it's not pretty, and it's 24/7. These people that say that politics is a part-time job, I'd love to meet that person. It's just 24/7, but it's inspiring, and it's the only way we change the world and make a difference. So if you don't like who's there, step up, get trained, get ready, and run for office.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That was great. That was great. Reverend Ray, the next question is for you. How does moral religious convictions influence the reproductive rights debate?
Thank you so much. Ms. Morning. So I think one of the other panelists mentioned that most Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. And to sort of mirror that, most Christians believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. As a matter of fact, 62% of women who have abortions identify as women of faith. Now, is it an overwhelming majority of Christians that support abortion? No. And that is for one reason. There is not a unified Christian stance on abortion. And the Christian faith, which is very diverse in terms of demographics, tradition, and theology, there is not agreement on when life begins and when abortion is morally acceptable. Some feel life begins at conception, others feel it begins when a fetus is a viable and can survive on its own outside of the mother's womb. Christians support or oppose abortion with few exceptions or altogether. There are also some Christians who are ambivalent and hold no opinion on it. And this issue is not unique to the Christian faith tradition. There is also a range of scholarly thoughts and beliefs within the Jewish and Islamic faith traditions. So abortion involves the concepts of life and death, and it affects people very deeply, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So abortion is a difficult issue. It's controversial and sometimes an unresolved moral issue for Christians and other people of faith. And we see this conundrum, these very strong feelings, and it's almost polarizing Americans, play out in the national abortion debate.
Thank you so much. My next question for you is, what factors should people of faith consider when taking a position on abortion?
Sure. I would say the first question that I would ask myself, and I challenge all people of faith to ask themselves, is what is the spiritual basis for the beliefs you hold on reproductive rights or women's health, reproductive justice? For me, as I worked my way through my position, my beliefs on abortion, I had to do that very thing. And, as a Christian, for me, the Christian story of redemption from humanity's fall from grace is predicated on freedom of choice. We've heard Sharice talk about bodily autonomy, which is the freedom to choose what to do with our own body, is a sacred right. The woman's right to choose whether to have an abortion is a sacred right. And more than that, God is love. As followers of Jesus Christ, we are called to love our neighbors as ourselves, which is the second greatest commandment. So to me, as I reflect on my faith, my beliefs, one cannot refuse, limit, or remove the structures of love around mothers and children and profess to be pro-life. Failing to provide the basic human needs for children and their families, like healthcare, quality and affordable healthcare, education, livable housing, healthy food, and clean water and air, aborts the least and most vulnerable among us. So when we focus on building a community of love and support for all of God's children, that is when we protect, support, and celebrate life. The second question that I will ask is, how does overturning Roe versus Wade affect you and those around you? A lot of times we stop at ourselves, and if we don't feel like there's a direct interest, we leave it alone, we're not involved, or we don't pay enough attention or are not as active as we could be. So for more than 50 years under Roe versus Wade, women have had the freedom over their own bodies and have been able to make the best decision for their own reproductive health. Prior to the Supreme Court's decision, this sacred right was protected by the Constitution. For me as a Black woman, as I asked myself this very same question, I realized that for Black women in particular, the constitutional right to abortion is critical in a country that neither prioritizes nor adequately supports their health and well-being. Sharice gave a couple of statistics that I think are useful here for this conversation about the U.S. has the highest Black maternal mortality rate among all developing countries. And many Black women still lack quality and affordable health care for themselves and their families. To add to that, Black women are less likely to have access to programs and services needed to raise their children in a safe and healthy environment. So Black women are at a disadvantage already. And Black women are at a higher risk of sexual violence, which may result in unwanted pregnancies. So to lift the burdens on Black women and families and to alleviate some of the pain and suffering, we must protect a woman's right to abortion. The last question that I would ask myself is, what can you do to impact the conversation? How can you positively impact the conversation? No matter where you are, which side you sit on, what can you do to impact the conversation? And I would say there are three things you can do. We talked a lot, Patty and Sharice and Senator McClellan talked a lot about voting, and that is the number one thing that we have got to do. We have got to vote for a candidate that represents our interest. Second, learn about the issue. Educate yourselves and urge others to do the same. Share the information that you are receiving, that you are hearing tonight with people that you love, people that you care about, so they can also be educated and make informed decisions. And then the third is to support groups that also educate and advocate for your interest, for reproductive rights, or whatever it is that you are supporting, whatever your beliefs lead you to. So those three things are questions that I want to pose to you, and those questions will lead you to a concrete decision on what position you take on abortion.
Thank you so much, Reverend Ray. Very, very well put. Okay, my next question will be to Mr. Liggins. Mr. Liggins, what is the significance of this moment in history?
What is the significance of this point in history? Well, first off, I just have to say thank you to everybody on the panel for just letting me participate at all. And though I do appreciate you guys, it is a setup of all setups to come behind all of you. But hey, other than that, I just have to say that. But no, I think these moments are very rare in history because oftentimes we get to study history. It's a thing that you hear about, right? It's not a thing you get to be involved with. But right now we actually have an opportunity to make history because we already know that this entire thing, first and foremost, was attack on women's reproductive health. We know what the intention of this of this moment is, that they wanted to attack the rights of our mothers, our friends, our co-workers, our spouses, our sisters. We know what this moment's about. But I think it's also important to remember that it's not finished right now. It's just what they're trying to do. We have an opportunity right now, and it's important to talk about why is this moment important in history, because we have the opportunity to be able to say, we clearly saw the attack, and we stood up, and we stopped it. We stopped it right in its tracks, and we can all be a part of the army of people that got out and fought for, as Ms. Scott said, for actual reproductive justice, right? Not just pontificating on it, but we all had those opportunities. So I think that that's probably, when you think about history as it relates to the direct result, I also think this moment is important in history because if we don't win, we also know that this is not going to be the ending point for the attacks that the architects of this, the people who put this in motion, though it's very clear in this particular, this session is about Roe v. and women's reproductive health. We know this is not where they want to stop, right? We know that. We already know it was in their actual opinions. Like when they wrote about Roe v., they already started to discuss the other things that they think they can do. And so this is an incredibly important moment in history. Like I said, because all of us get that opportunity to stand up and stand firm, first and foremost, for our women and for reproductive health. But more importantly, also make sure that we stop, stemming at the source, that the other attacks that we already know are coming, that we stand up now, because it's not going to stop. And for anybody who believes that this is going to stop right here, you haven't been paying attention. It's very, very clear. And it's very sad to me that often you see that people start the journey to oppressive regimes by oppressing women. It's almost always like that. And so for those people who think they can stand on the side, particularly men who are like, oh, that has not necessarily a lot to do with me, it's not stopping there, even though it shouldn't have to take your own, but it's not stopping there anyway. So we already know that it starts with women and it ends with the rest of us. So I think this opportunity, like I said, for my personal belief is that this moment in history is our chance to stand up, look them in the face, and to fight it back. So non-violently. I don't want to use too much fight language, but but this is a fight and I'm ready for it. I'm proud to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liggins. This last question for you is, why should we all care about the Supreme Court decision to end the constitutional right to abortion?
Well, I think a lot of it I just said, right? So I don't want to repeat myself. But I would like to add something to that, though. I also think that it's really important that we also kind of have these discussions on what I call like fake morality, right? Why is this important to be? I think it's really dangerous when people start picking and choosing very small moments where their morality or their religion is going to affect like this one sliver of the law, right? It's not going to affect all these other moments. It's not going to affect how we feel about, as Audrey was talking about, the systems around us, right? And so, I think that in terms of caring about it, I think it's just really important to see that this is kind of the entryway again to this kind of omnibus plan. It's like watching a movie where you kind of were in the lab with the evil genius. It's like, we're going to start with reproductive rights and it's going to end with world domination. Like we were in the lab when they talked about it. And to be honest, it's not something they haven't discussed. Anybody can go and research what they've been talking about, why they've been talking about it on this issue and others. And it's very easy to see the correlation points. And so if you can't see that and you're sitting still, I don't know what to tell you. Like, my dad's a preacher. He always say, hey, some things don't get you on fires because your wood is wet. Right. And so I think right now, everybody's got to get on fire, and we've got to, we just got to see this moment for exactly what it is and stand up, not just for the rights of women, which should be enough anyway, but also because we already know that it's going to just continue to lead to attack on our like I said, on everyone around us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liggins. Very well put. Yes, we have a lot to be concerned about right now. Now that we've gone through all the panelists, our next question is going to be a question to each panelist. And what we're going to be actually talking about is, I want to find out, what is your organization doing in response to this ruling? I will first start with Ms. Scott.
Sure. So when I introduced myself, I stated, that we are located in Memphis, Tennessee, but we're also located in Chicago, Illinois. And one of the reasons that we expanded, which is very recently, we've been working on this for a moment, but finally have been able to raise the dollars to expand our organization to Illinois, because Illinois, like Senator McClellan's state, is a sanctuary state. It's really important for us, for me, as the founder of the organization, to make sure that we can continue our work and to not have that work stunted or stopped by folks whose main objective is not because they care about life, okay, but because they're trying to control people's bodies, because they are trying to shore up votes within the white community so that they can maintain power in this country. It has absolutely nothing to do with Black and brown children. It has nothing to do with babies. It has nothing to do with any of that, because if that were true, we would have seen those same folks right alongside the movement for Black lives, right alongside what's going on down in Jackson, Mississippi, with folks having dirty water in Flint, Michigan, and in these different places where living children, where babies are becoming contaminated with lead, with because of police sanctioned violence and all of these types of, different issues that are impacting low income communities and communities of color very specifically. So we have expanded to Illinois so that we can continue our abortion advocacy. But in the meantime, we're still able to offer our practical support fund in Tennessee, which is our Tennessee Repro Access Fund. Which we have always made sure that people had access to practical support services like transportation, childcare, money for food, money for gas, even for lodging, because Tennessee, before the abortion ban, had a 48-hour waiting period where folks were not able to see their first day of appointment, have their ultrasound and their procedure in one day, but had to come back. So we recognize that because Tennessee sits, in the middle of about 6 or 7 states, that there are so many different folks that were coming into Tennessee for care, including folks from Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, as well. And so, among other states. And so it was really important for us to make sure that we continue to do that work. But for Illinois, one of the things that we will be able to do, because we anticipate that at some point we will no longer be able to provide those types of resources, we have recently started our Illinois Reproductive Justice Pipeline Fund, which very specifically is for folks who are in the Southeast to be able to get to states like Virginia or to get to Illinois, California, other states where that we are calling sanctuary states, where folks can get care, because we recognize now that the stakes are a bit higher. Folks in the states that touch Tennessee were able to many times just drive over the state line. Now we're having to raise enough dollars for folks to get a plane ticket, right? If they need to do a train ticket, and then the lodging that comes with that as well, which is making it way more expensive, but it is our job as reproductive justice advocates, and for those who have not only practical support funds, but abortion funds across the country, which are several that have been at this moment raising dollars and have been doing that even before the decision came down from the Supreme Court, because we, especially reproductive justice advocates, knew that this was coming. We knew that this was coming when Trump became the president, that this was a very real reality when President Obama was blocked from being able to decide who would be Supreme Court justices under his administration. We knew that this was a real possibility and have been preparing since then. So the other thing that we are doing as a way for prevention, right? Because, we don't, our work is not just about abortion access, but it is about prevention. It is about intervention. We have a national safe sex kit distribution program where folks for the last couple years, especially due to COVID-19, this program started as a local program for Memphians to just kind of come to our office and get a free safe sex kit. But because of COVID-19, we moved that program online where you can get both internal and external condoms, lube, emergency contraception that is going to be extremely key for folks, especially folks who may be victims of rape. Folks with, the condom may have broken, contraception sabotage, for folks to be able to use the emergency contraception that would even prohibit a pregnancy from even becoming an actual pregnancy. Those types of things. And then even having masks that we give some level of PPE support as well. But we've been doing that now for about 2 years. I will say the influx of these types of requests have become very expensive, and we've had to limit over the last couple months how many of those safe sex kits we send out around the country. But I mean, we're getting requests from reservations. We're getting requests from as far as California, as far up the coast, East Coast as Maine. And that right there in our hub in Memphis is supporting, even last year up to a little over 20,000 safe sex kits went out from our organization. So we are definitely committed to making sure that people have the tools to decide if and when they want to become pregnant. and at least to be able to support that component under these types of dire conditions. But of course, as I said, those are expensive things, but those are still the ways that we are committed.
Thank you so much. Where might we find more information about the work you are doing on reproductive rights?
Sure. Well, our reproductive justice work can be found at www.sisterreach.org or sisterreach-tennessee.org, tn.org. We just had to change it because of the change. I'm getting used to putting the TN in there. So sisterreach-tn.org is how folks can learn more about our work. And super excited about those for Reverend Ray, who shared some really important pieces today. They can also learn more about our faith-based organizing. Since Memphis is in the Bible Belt, we think it's important to make sure that we continue to engage our various communities, interfaith communities. And so they can also find more about that work and all of the work that we're doing in Tennessee. We are just getting into Illinois. So this year is not necessarily about rolling out a lot of programming. We are just doing our due diligence to make sure that we are on the ground to understand what it is that Black communities very specifically are in need of so that we can answer that best. And we will be rolling out more information about our Illinois work as we complete our needs assessment for that area. But for now, the majority of our work as far as direct service, our harm reduction work, which includes our Safe Sex Kit program and other programming, our education, our trainings, and outreach is going to still be happening out of Tennessee. And we are committed to staying in Tennessee for the long haul to support our community members.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next question I will direct to Senator McClellan. Senator McClellan, what is your organization doing in response to this ruling?
So I'm going to answer that from two perspectives. As I mentioned, right now the Senate of Virginia with our one, we have a 1-seat Democratic majority with one member who is a wild card, frankly, on reproductive health issues. And so right now the Senate is the firewall against efforts to roll back the progress that we have made in becoming a safe haven for abortion in the South. Me personally, in addition to that and my legislative work, I'm encouraging people to share their stories. One of the things people don't think about is the practical impact that abortion bans have on the doctor-patient relationship. I became the first member of the House of Delegates when I was in the House to be pregnant while in office. In our almost 400-year history, it was 2010. And in talking with my doctor about pregnancies that went horribly wrong, those are the pregnancies, usually, particularly after 20 weeks, sometimes after 15 weeks, where abortion bans are frankly the cruelest. Pregnancies that are not viable, and people who get a devastating diagnosis from their doctor, usually a second or a third opinion, and have to make excruciating decisions about what is best for them, their health, and their circumstances. And when people hear these stories, they think, well, that's not abortion, but it is. Because most laws do not distinguish between miscarriages, incompleted miscarriages, or if there's a devastating fetal abnormality. So I encourage people to share their stories as I share those stories every time that I get to force. There was a video clip when Lindsey Graham introduced his 15-week ban, and someone who had suffered a devastating fetal diagnosis asked him about it. He didn't know how to respond, because most of these politicians introducing these bills, most of whom are white men over 50, have no idea what happens when someone is pregnant, have no idea how dangerous pregnancy can be. And so making sure that we are educating people, making sure we are connecting people to abortion funds, making sure we are supporting our providers like Planned Parenthood and Whole Women's Health, and making sure that people know that they need to vote. And the last thing that I will say, and I think DeMarc alluded to it, the same people who are trying to restrict access to abortion are trying to restrict access to the ballot. I'll say it again. The same people who are trying to restrict access to abortion are trying to restrict access to the ballot. They're connected. LGBTQ rights, connected. Black maternal health, connected. So be vigilant and vote.
Thank you. Excuse me. Where might we find more information about the work you are doing on reproductive rights?
So the easiest way is go to my website at jennifermcclellan.com and follow me on social media. You can find out how on that website, and that'll tell you everything you need to know about what I'm doing and what the Senate is doing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Russo. I'm going to direct those same two questions to you. What is your organization doing in response to this ruling?
Well, first, thank you for that question, Josephine, and I will answer it in a minute, happily. But I just want to make a shout out to our lone fabulous guy here, DeMarc. We need allies and partners too. We're tired of doing all this by ourselves, right? Are we not? We're tired. We need guys. We need non-binary individuals. We need our transgender friends. We need everybody who believes as we do. That's the bottom line. So, DeMarc, welcome. We always want you in our corner, always. What are we doing? We're investing in women leaders. A lot of your audience tonight, they're looking at Senator McClellan. How do I get to be Senator McClellan? She's so amazing. They're looking at Sharice. I want to make an impact on the ground. How can I learn how to be so brilliant and articulate and so, emotionally connected? How do I do that? How do I energize my base? I want to learn how to do that. Adjua Ray, well, she's one of mine, so that explains why she's so bright and articulate and just incredibly connected. What Reverend Ray will share with you is we have a phenomenal community at the campaign school at Yale. So it's not enough for me to give you brilliant training. We will train you well so you would be ready for anything that comes your way. And all of us who are in the trenches, we know how tough this business can be, and it is indeed a business. You got to be tough, but you also have to have a dream team behind you who believe in you, who's going to be your safety net, and who's going to be there for you 24/7. That's what we offer to our grads. That's the investment, the ongoing investment we make to our grads in investing in them as leaders, no matter what path they choose. You can be a leader. Here's an incredible example. Josephine, look at you leading an organization in your community. Oh my God, I don't know what to do on this issue. Call Josephine. I bet you're on speed dial to many, Josephine, right?
Yes,
That's how
I
it
am.
works.
Yes, I
That's
am.
how it works. That's how we make these connections. We change the world. We raise our hand. We're there for people. It makes a difference. And when Dr. Steele was talking he just was talking to me about we are one race, one community, a community of love. Yes, we are. In order to be that, we got to be there for one another. So that is what you get when you come to our school to be trained. Basically, Reverend Ray will tell you, you get us forever. Our website is tcsyale.org. Our phone number is 203-734-7385. Please give us a call or visit our Facebook page or our website to learn more about our upcoming trainings. And the second question, Josephine.
That was my second question.
Okay.
Where might we find more information about the work you are doing on reproductive rights.
Well, and Senator McClellan said it, you know, I mean, voters are on to this. Voters know. Look at what happened in Kansas. Kansas, not Virginia, not Connecticut, Kansas. Okay. I mean, there was a huge gender gap in that race. And most of the women who came out, Republicans and Democrats, by the way, who came out to vote in support of Roe, didn't vote for anything else. They just went and they voted for the referendum, the initiative, and then they went home. So our whole thing is not only, yes, you've got to, you know, vote on things that are important to you, but you also, again, it matters who's in office. You've got to stay and educate yourselves and vote for people who are supportive of you.
Thank you so much. Reverend Ray, I'm going to direct those two questions to you now. I would like to know, what is your organization doing in response to this ruling?
Sure, and I have to start with absolutely thanking Patty and just giving a testimony of how impactful the campaign school has been on me and my life and my leadership as a community leader and as a faith leader. So thank you, Patty, and thank you to the campaign school for everything. So there are 4 things that we are doing that I'd like to share. The first is, of course, hosting and participating in conversations like this. It's important to raise awareness on this issue and to educate around this issue. So that is the first thing that we are doing. The second is we have created a fact sheet for clergy and faith leaders to use so that they can have the education that they need. And as they are sharing information, you know, faith leaders are trusted sources in any faith tradition. They are most likely one of the most trusted sources, and we need to arm them with accurate information. We want to dispel those myths. We want to make sure that they have the correct information that they are passing along to their congregants and people in the community. The third thing that we are doing is creating a kitchen table toolkit. So we want to be able to share with women tidbits, bullet points, ideas to have conversations around this issue at home, at the nail salon, at the hair salon, wherever they are, where they can introduce this conversation and really lead in their circle on this conversation. We want to give them the information that they need to be able to do that at home around the dinner table with their girlfriends. The fourth thing that we are doing is creating healing circles. This is a very traumatic thing for a lot of women, most women, and especially for women of color. And we carry a lot on our backs. We are disproportionately affected by almost everything. And we are tired. So we are working to create safe spaces, circles where we can just heal together as we try to navigate through the time that we are living in now. So those are some things that we are doing on this issue currently.
Thank you so much. Where might we find more information about the work you are doing on reproductive rights?
Check us out online at womenofpraise.com. It's praise spelled with a Z. We have a little bit of flair in our name. So womenofpraise.com. And we are at Women of Praise on all social platforms.
Thank you so much. These 2 questions I'm going to direct to you, Mr. Liggins. What is your organization doing in response to this ruling?
Well, I think, first and foremost, when everything started kind of coming up, one of the first things Dr. Steele talked to us about was, he felt a lot of passion about it, right? But we were kind of sitting around talking, and he's like, we don't want to get in front of something then maybe it's not our best space to be in front of, if that makes sense. And so one of the first things he did was kind of enlist me to try to do forums like this and start reaching out. First, I think our first contact was with Reverend Ray and Women of Praise, who did step up and work with us immediately Obviously, we work with Ms. Matthews as well. But that's kind of one of the first things we want to do is make sure that we kind of start connecting with people. And that's how we meet Cherie Scott. I remember one of my first conversations with Sheena, who's not on this call, if Sheena was insistent, she was like, if you want to know what's going on, you need to talk to Cherie Scott. And I remember even just personally being blown away. I told Ms. Scott this earlier. The first time I talked, I really was sick. I don't want to get into the details, but I was not feeling good. But I was a little invigorated. Now, you couldn't get me out of bed that day, but she's dynamic. But my point being, first thing that we want to do as an organization was one, say that we're here. We're aware that we're the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We're aware of the sound of our voice. We're aware of our history of being able to move this country forward. But we're also we're also humble enough to know that we can kind of take that and follow people's leads, right? And so that's one of the first things we wanted to do. Obviously, we want to make sure we use our platforms like, whatever, everybody's got their list, our Facebook list, our constant contacts, all those things. We want to make sure we highlight these type of moments, and we want to continue to do so, as well as make sure that we spotlight it in our national publications like we have with our SCLC magazine, and try to make sure that we continue to highlight that work. And of course, lastly, does our efforts nationally, but we're also encouraging our chapters to make sure that they are doing their flavor of this, because we know that this fight is going to be a local fight, and we understand that what we may be doing from a national perspective is one thing, but what Josephine's going to be doing in Maryland, what Smart might be doing out in LA, or LeBan and New Orleans, or I don't want to sit here and name all the chapters. So, but my point being, we want to make sure that we're encouraging them to also do these type of things on a local level. And finally, just make sure we continue to tie this issue to voting, because at the end of the day, anger is great, but anger is not change. It's just not change. And one of the things that still talks about this a lot. He's like, people love to get in the streets. They'll put a sign up, they'll use a hashtag, but they're not doing anything, right? Because if you're not affecting either the political environment or the business environment around you, you're really not doing anything, right? And so we want to continue to encourage people to make sure that this issue is directly connected to voting. And I would say that, and just to preempt you, our information can be found at national.sclc.org. That's probably the best launching spot for us. So anybody who's looking to see what we're doing, it is national.sclc.org. But both on that's the website, that's our Twitter, and all our stuff. So I hope that answers it.
Okay, well, you answered my second question about how we can get in touch with you. So at this point, we look to see if there's any questions from any of our attendees. Is there any questions that any of our panelists have? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to be giving closing remarks. This forum was conducted so that we can educate everyone on the importance of voting. We know it's a forum on Roe versus Wade, but what we don't understand is our vote is a determination of what happens in our country. As we saw during the Kansas election, your vote makes a difference. Roe versus Wade put an onus on us to make the decision. You have a right and a probability that your vote will count on crucial issues. Mm-hmm. It is very important that you go to the polls so that you have a voice in the decisions that are made in our country. I want to thank everyone for attending this forum. I especially want to thank our panelists. This has been wonderful working with you, Ms. Russo, Senator McClellan, Reverend Ray, Ms. Scott, Mr. Liggins, and I definitely can't forget Ms. Matthews. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. I want to thank all of our attendees that did participate. And I want to say that I will see all of you at the polls. Something that I also want to piggyback on. We know that this was Roe versus Wade that they overturned. But what we also don't look at is the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act has a 25-year span. In 5 years, the Voting Rights Act will have to be reauthorized. Now, depending on who we have as the president, the same way Roe versus Wade was overturned, the Voting Rights Act can be overturned. So we have to understand the importance of people of color going to the poll. We went to the poll when President Obama was running because we felt, oh, we're going to get our first black president. We have to understand it's not just about the president. It's about all the elected officials and what their platforms are. We have to educate ourselves. That's one thing that we don't do. A lot of us vote by sight and not by knowledge. Knowledge is powerful, and we need to become educated on our different candidates that are running. Don't just vote for them because they're going to give you a can of soda or hot dog at a picnic, because that is not what you're looking for. You're looking for what are they going to do for you for the next 4 years. And with that, I want to say again, thanks to all of you. This has been beautiful, and I appreciate the opportunity to have been your moderator. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you so much, Josephine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Josephine. We appreciate you.
You guys are awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was great.